want to live a healthy, quality life, right? Like you have to take care of yourself. And there's like some really basic things: sleep well, eat well, and stretch. And if you can, if you have no time other than that, like you're still way better off than most people.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down in person with Casey Parlett. It's some exciting stuff today, ladies and gentlemen. If you've been listening to this show for the last year plus, you know that it has been a dream of mine to do this show in person. I'm very grateful for the digital medium and the ability to converse with guests all over the world, but I have always valued face-to-face conversation. And for those of you listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, I really hope that you enjoy the full production. This is something that I'm going to keep making an effort to do going forward with local guests here in the San Diego area, as well as traveling up to Los Angeles. I'm going to make a push until this show exists in a studio setting where all guests will be face-to-face. If you love this podcast and want to support it, please take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to the YouTube channel. This helps the show get discovered organically and helps me continue to bring on amazing guests. There's also now timestamps in the show notes, so feel free to jump around to the part that interests you most, although I always recommend listening to the episode in its entirety. Casey Parlett is a former professional Muay Thai fighter, current Jiu Jitsu enthusiast, training partner, and co-owner of DBC Fitness in Carlsbad, California. He also recently opened the doors to their recovery center, which I've been going to weekly as part of my recovery routine. And as a special gift, Casey has extended an offer for the listeners of this show who live in the San Diego area. So if you're interested in becoming part of this community at the recovery center, they're offering $70 off their membership. There's a link in the show notes, so feel free to take advantage of that. It's something that I try to incorporate into my training routine at least twice a week, between the sauna, the cold plunge, compression therapy, and all the amazing tools that they have there at their disposal. In my eyes, DBC's Recovery Center is an example of flawless execution. From the level of cleanliness to the equipment selection and quality, nothing was skipped when they designed this facility. So check it out. I hope that you enjoy the first in-person episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast just as much as I did. Without further ado, Casey Parlett. Casey, we are here officially in person. I've wanted to do this for over a year and a half, so thank you so much for being here and making this a reality, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for being here, and thanks for doing it in the gym and kind of giving me an opportunity to stay here and have the conversation at essentially my home.
Let's rewind the clock a ways and get into fighting in general. But what was it really that pulled you into martial arts? Why this sport? Of all the things you could do, you're talented, you're athletic, you could have gone into multiple different sports, but what was it about that where you were like, this is what I got to get into?
I think my story is similar to most professional fighters. I started martial arts when I was 3 years old. When I was really little, did traditional karate from 3 to 7, I think. Karate wasn't cool in those days. Martial arts weren't cool in those days. So did all the team sports, and kind of pretty early, like 7th, 8th grade, learned that team sports weren't my thing. I hated losing because of other people. So I kind of drifted towards like the extreme sports world, race BMX bikes, snowboard, wakeboard, kind of that world. I also grew up the youngest of 4 boys.
Nice.
I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs through school. So like I was already like the weird outcast kid. Got in a lot of fights growing up. Having martial arts even at a young age, like I knew how to fight. I was small, so it just kind of, in a sense, like it just kind of pulled me into it. I was working as a bouncer right out of high school. Had just started training again, and kind of long story shorter, I ended up moving down to Southern California. Basically, was training, got offered to fight, won, got offered another fight, won, and all of a sudden, like 10 fights in before I lost, and it was just kind of what I did.
What was it about the team sports thing? Because that's something I identified with a lot too growing up. Like I skied competitively. I played soccer, but I played soccer so I stayed in shape for other things that I wanted to do. But there was something about this, like knowing that I could show up and work super hard and other people could just not give a shit. That dynamic like never sat well with me. But I don't think I realized that until much later. But what was the age where you realized like I'm an individual sports guy? This doesn't light me, because some people get lit up by team sports, right? They come fully alive when they're in that kind of environment. They get pushed by people, and that's like their setting. Why did you feel a rejection of that?
I mean, it's super similar. I'll just tell the story. So, played Pop Warner football. We had a really good team one year. I think I was 7th grade, and we were one game away from going to like the Pop Warner Super Bowl in Orlando, Florida or whatever, like super big deal.
Yeah.
And in those days it was better than it is now, but like everybody on the team had to play at least 4 downs.
Just so that you get rotation.
So that like the kids that essentially suck, that shouldn't be there anyway, that their parents just kind of put them there because they want their kids to play football, so they get their playing time.
Yep.
So like those kids had to have their 4 downs, and we essentially lost a game by 1 touchdown because one of those kids got ran over, missed a tackle, and that was it. And it was like so disheartening. Like you play offense, defense, special teams, and even at that age, like it was so frustrating because same personality I have now, I had then, and like I was all into everything that I did, and I worked my ass off, like no matter what. And I was in it to win. I was in it to be the best, and exactly that. Like you lose because of somebody else, because somebody else didn't care as much as you did. And I don't think I like necessarily put it together at that age, like that I wasn't a team sports person, but I think naturally I kind of gravitated towards those individual and kind of fringe sports because of that. And then I'll kind of, just because it's fitting and it kind of like stems into some of the other stuff that I've done in my life. I took a break from fighting when I first opened the CrossFit gym in 2010. This was like right when the CrossFit Games was kind of kicking off and getting big. Yep. And I got talked into competing for a couple of years, and we had
like trying to go to the games.
Games, and I basically I was training, had a fight scheduled, and everybody was like, "You got to compete with us. You got to compete." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do it. It'll be fun. Like whatever. It'll be just kind of like a one deal thing." Competed. We were pretty good for like what we should have been the next year.
Team
team CrossFit competitions that they were doing. And I as the owner of the gym and like the leader, I felt like it was like I was like almost obligated in some ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
Basically like competitive exercising is stupid, and that's a whole different conversation. But like as a leader and as a competitive person, I was like, well,
we're circling back on CrossFit. Don't worry, we're gonna get there. Yeah.
So, but basically like essentially the same thing happened. Like the following year, we were in the place where we would have gone to the CrossFit Games, which is like a huge deal. Like as an affiliate in those days, like you have a team that goes to the CrossFit Games, like it's like a huge marketing push and members coming into your gym because of that. So I had that side of it and the like I want to win side, and we basically lost because one person like shit the bed and like didn't do what they were supposed to do and couldn't pull their weight.
Yeah.
And like I knew at that point I wasn't a team sports person, but it just kind of like cemented it in. Like I am not a team sports person, and it's not because I don't believe in people or that. It's just like I want to be surrounded by people that want it as bad as I do. And when you're on a big team,
it's a mixed bag.
It's really, really hard to get that. And like when I was fighting, I was the type of person where like I knew that I depended on my teammates, the people that I trained with every day, my coaching staff, all the people that worked with me. And when I won, we all won together. But when we lost, like I took that all on. Like I lost because I lost. Like it had nothing to do with anybody else. I was in the ring, but they were the ones that helped me win. So like I very much believe in the team atmosphere in some versions, but I know for me, I'm a much better person when I'm the individual competing.
It is interesting in those settings, like to be a good individual competitor, you have to be surrounded by quality people. So if you are a top, like a prize fighter, look to the left, look to the right. These guys are surrounded by people that are pushing them to become the best version of themselves, challenging them in points of weakness, and then also lifting them up in terms of technique, sleep, recovery, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of funny when you find people like ourselves who thrive in those individual environments where, like, I mean, even with jiu-jitsu is a good example. I am better when I get to train with people like you, because you push me a way that I'm like, maybe I don't notice with someone else, or we do stand up and you trip the fuck out of me and other people don't do that, or someone else challenges you in a different way. So even though it's individual, if you decide to compete or on the day-to-day, you being there with that other person is the only reason why you're able to get better. So it's a unique, like, the team thing where the team winning isn't the element, but you being able to thrive is a product of being surrounded by people. So when you were younger, we'll kind of juxtapose this against this childhood incident, because it's so common that people that end up in martial arts or fighting or something of that capacity, there was a moment in their childhood where they got beat up, they got picked on, they got put down. Maybe it was being ostracized because you're not partaking in partying and drinking like everyone else. But in those initial instances of like bullying, getting beat up, getting in fights, what was that like? What was it like to depart from the kind of normalcy of an everyday kid's life and then ending up in these physical altercations?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm 38, so like it was still acceptable to get in fights. Like you could get in a fight at school and like to get sent home for the day and then like be back a day later or whatever, and nobody cared. Like it's not like it is now. So I think fighting in general was much more accepted in some ways then. But yeah, I mean, I was really small. So like until I was a junior in high school, I was like 5'2", 5'3", plus I was like the youngest in my family, surrounded by all boys. Yeah. So from there, for me, it was just kind of, I learned how to fight. I learned how to defend myself. I was tough. I was strong because of like the environment that I grew up in. But I also had that, like, nobody's going to tell me how it is, and I'm not going to back down to anybody. Like I'm always, I'm always going to be there to back up whatever. And if you have something to say to me, I'm going to be in your face. Yeah. And I wasn't the shit talking type. If you had a problem with me and I knew you had a problem with me and you got too close to me, I was just going to hit you because I wasn't going to give you the chance. Yeah. And I trained in martial arts at a young age. Like those are things that you learn. And like, even as silly as like traditional karate is in some ways, like the instincts and the things that it teach you and like sparring at a young age and not being afraid to get hit and knowing that you're not made of glass, like goes a really long way. And there's a lot of like the tough kids in high school that think they're really tough, and then you hit them and that's the end of the fight. Right. Yeah. So for me it was, and I wasn't out like looking for fights, but I also wasn't going to back down for the fight. So I wasn't like just going out and picking on people. I wasn't a bully, but I also wasn't
a pushover.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I didn't grow up in a town that had like a martial arts presence. It's a small ski town, right? Everyone skis, everyone trains for skiing. So there wasn't this like jiu-jitsu, karate, Muay Thai. There was wrestling, but when I was growing up, wrestling wasn't cool yet. It wasn't. It was like the corn-fed kids did wrestling and everyone else was like, I don't want to go wear a spandex and roll around on these mats with these people, right? Lo and behold, these are like all the UFC champions now. But at the time, I had like this primal fear about of altercation. Not that I was afraid that I would back down. It was all uncertainty. I didn't know what would happen if I ever got an interaction with someone else. So at a young age, even like going to the BMX park, I just had this like radar on my head where I would be very wary and distanced from everyone. And I think I carried it into my adult life, not in like a lack of confidence, but just being very hyper aware of the situation. And jiu-jitsu was a great thing because it finally gave me that opportunity to like express all this desire I had to like fight. We would do like dumb boxing matches and stuff when we were kids, but you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're all throwing haymakers, and some people get clocked and some people don't. And the people that get clocked think they suck at fighting, and the people that hit the other person think they're great. So it's like your perception of who you really are just makes no sense. When you went overseas, you went to what was the transition from like getting into fighting in California and being like, I'm going to Thailand. I'm going to go to the motherland of like where this art truly takes place.
So I I gravitated towards Muay Thai pretty early on. I had a coach in Petaluma where I grew up in Northern California, and I had just started training with him, just like pure, like just training to train. He was really well known in our area for self-defense. He's very, very good at what he did. All kind of started in Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's art, were kind of like the first mixed martial arts, however you want to look at it. So we did a lot of weapon stuff. We did a lot of crazy things where he'd lock us in like little tiny closets with three of us, and it was like everybody against everybody go.
I think that's called child abuse, actually.
Something like that. So I kind of started there. I ended up moving to Southern California just to get out of hometown, and ended up training out of Team Quest, and had some amazing coaches that I got to work with there. When Dan Henderson was training there with Sean Tompkins, and Sean Tompkins guys would come down, Sam Stout, Chris Hordecki, Mark Hominick, like that group. And then like everybody that would come through Team Quest getting ready for big fights. So I was in an amazing place, and I just kind of starting off, it was like amateur kickboxing and then Muay Thai, and I just kind of linked up with one of the trainers there, Joe Sarkeesian, and he was in the Muay Thai world and just started pushing me through fights, and I really was drawn to like the traditional aspect of it.
Yeah.
Especially in those days, MMA was like brawler sport.
Barbaric.
It's when tap out was big, and like you knew like
Affliction.
if the guy that you were fighting was in tap out shorts, that there was going to be no technique and he was going to be just trying to brawl with you. So that kind of started to push me more and more into the traditional route. I still trained Jiu Jitsu and still trained wrestling, but if I had an opportunity to fight a Muay Thai fight versus an MMA fight, I was taking the Muay Thai fight because I just really like enjoyed that aspect of it. And those days, it was really hard to get Muay Thai fights. So
in the U.S. or
in the U.S., yeah. So and like especially in California, there just wasn't a lot going on, and so I'd fight, and then all of a sudden there'd be a dry spell. And in those days, like if I wasn't fighting, I felt like I was wasting time.
Well, and isn't Muay Thai a little bit more high frequency bouts? Like you fight often, much more often in Muay Thai than you're going to fight in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, you can. And like even as like when I was fighting MMA and like coming up, I would fight as much as possible. I had a coach at one point and basically told me like fighters fight, so you better be fighting. Because like there's guys in the gym, they're like I'm a fighter, and then they get offered a fight and they're like I can't, I'm not ready. And so I was just always ready. I took a fight at one point, like the shortest notice fight I ever had was 10 hours. And it was not like a smoker fight, like a legit sanctioned fight. Like, and coach called me, "What are you doing tonight?" "Nothing." "All right, meet me here. We're fighting. This is who you're fighting. We'll figure it out when we get there."
Well, aren't you on the amateur level, right?
Yeah.
So on the amateur level, aren't you just dealing with a ton of just like bureaucracy and BS, and like people aren't really as much as they say they weigh. There's like just a lot of gray area in terms of who your opponent's actually going to be on the night that you're really fighting them.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, but more so in those days, like you're basically fighting as a professional, but instead of getting a check written to you, they're just handing you an envelope full of cash. Like everything was pretty much the same. Like that was really the big difference. It's very different now with like the camo organizations and kind of how much the IKF has got involved in the amateur stuff. But I mean, I would show up to fight an amateur fight and the rule sets were essentially the same. Still weighing in the same way that the pros were weighing in. Weight class were the same. The gloves were the same. Literally the only difference was I wasn't getting drug tested and they were handing me cash instead of a check.
Was there temptation to do PEDs and to dope at that time? Because I always think about this, like you are putting I think it's hard for people to understand when you're strength training or weightlifting or something, it's you against the bar. And if you're not on point that day, you're not on point. When you step in the ring with somebody, you can get really fucked up. And if that person isn't who they say they are, and they're doing performance enhancing drugs, they're on steroids, and it's not a organization that tests for it, the difference between getting punched in the face by someone who's on steroids and someone who's not is like a serious problem. The risk goes up significantly. That person's able to recover at a pace that like you just can't recover. It's like a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old. So is there temptation when you're coming up in the amateur ranks and you're trying to break into the pros, and you basically just have to win, right? There's no margin for error.
Yeah, I mean, it's very cutthroat. Like, you have to win all the time. You either start winning and get on the good side, or you lose and then you're just
brought
in to lose. And
yeah.
I'd been on both sides of it coming up, starting off, like, you fight for promoters that are trying to build people up and you just got to go in and beat them. For me, I was straight edge, and I still am straight edge. Yeah. So, like, the steroids never was even a thought for me.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that I trained with over the years that did them. Just is what it is. And
wasn't your cup of tea.
Wasn't my deal. And yeah, like, I would never not fight, especially in those days. Because I knew somebody was on steroids, like, I was going to beat him anyway. I didn't care.
I feel like that's the only mental mindset you can adopt.
But, like, looking back, like you said, like, it's a life or death sport, and that's how I trained, and we can kind of segue into that stuff. But, like, when I train, like, I train with, like, this person's, like, there to kill me, and it's like kill or be killed. And so, like, that kind of came across in the way that I worked out, and the way that I ate, and the way that I lifted weights, and the way that I ran and did all the stupid stuff. Like, even when I was fighting for $300, like, I still trained like I was a professional, getting paid $300,000. So, like, the steroids thing it's fucked. And if you're taking them, you're a cheater, like, period, the end. Like, I don't care what sport you're in. Like, I know it's, like, a big thing in the Jiu Jitsu world. Mm-hmm. And there's some people there's some organizations that are testing for it, and some that aren't, and some that are just saying, like, it's okay because it's not like a true combat sport, and there's no striking. But it's total bullshit, because of exactly what you said is, like, when you take a performance enhancing drug, like, it's allowing you to do something that you wouldn't be able to do without it.
Right.
Even down, like, there's a huge argument. Now, we don't need to get too far into the weeds on this, but I think it's interesting. Like, the people always bitch and complain about marijuana not being legal and people getting popped for marijuana. And, like, yes, like, is it a performance enhancing drug in the sense that, like, it's making you stronger or it's going to make you more powerful? Like, no.
Right.
But if it's allowing you to sleep at night when you otherwise wouldn't be able to sleep, like, for anybody that's been through a fight camp, like, those last weeks when you're cutting weight, like, you're dealing with sleepless nights over and over and over again. And if smoking pot allows you to sleep, like, now you have an advantage.
That's a performance advantage. Yeah.
Right. And it's really, like, simple in that area, and people will argue, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Like, it's my opinion. I think it's total bullshit. I don't think, like, if you're going to compete in a true combat sport against somebody else, like, just do it the right way. And just, if you don't have it in you to do it without it, I don't believe you should compete. People can hate me for that. I don't really care. But, like, that's how I truly feel, because I've been there and I've done it.
Right. I think that's the true athlete speaking. And my views on this have gone back and forth over time. I think not that I'm a fan of cheaters and cheating. I would agree with you on that. I think that when you the degree to which you can dope is pretty significant, right? Like, you look at what Lance Armstrong accomplished. Take away the doping, it's a different dude. You know, like, that, his ability to dope the way that he doped. And it's not to say that other people in the Tour de France weren't doing it too, right? They were. But the fact that he could put him in the position that he was in.
Yeah, and that's it.
That sucks, dude. For me as an athlete growing up, watching how amazing that was, and recognizing on one side of it, this is fantastic. Look at what this guy's doing for cancer research. Look at how many lives he's inspiring. Do you want to go back and take that all away? No, because that's a net positive for society. But when you look at it as an athlete, as someone who put blood, sweat, and tears into trying to be the best at something as bad as you fucking can, it's infuriating when someone is willing to do that. When you look at jiu-jitsu, like ADCC, to one degree, I'm hats off to ADCC because they're very transparent about it. They're not trying to lie and say that all their guys are clean. They know their guys aren't clean, and they're very open door about it. But deep down, there's part of it that kind of sucks, because why can't we just have guys that aren't doping compete? They're, especially in a sport like jiu-jitsu. I mean, a lot of the time is spent in entanglements and on the ground and jockeying for a position. So is steroids making that much more exciting? I don't think so. I think it might make the guys look fucking insane. I mean, some of these guys are literally look like they could walk through brick walls, but as the fan, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
When you see that happen.
It takes away I could do that too.
Right, because yes, I mean, that's well said. It does change the perspective of the fan because now you're distanced from it. And I think that's one thing that makes sports so beautiful is you can go outside and grab a football and throw it with your friend, and you can think about being a football player. And when you see guys that are just superhuman, you're left with a choice. You go, do I want to be superhuman and make superhuman choices to get that way? Or do I want to be normal and boring? Which is a bummer that that's option two. I mean, it should be, or I can do this the natural way. And I mean, it is in a sense a great segue because we both respect recovery so much and put so much effort into that kind of thing in our own training, even as guys in their 30s who do this for fun. When did you start to value recovery?
Not early enough. That's the simple answer. Yeah. I mean, I was just like every other young athlete. It was train more. Probably, man, I was 23, maybe 24, and I had a strength and conditioning coach that I was working with, and he asked me one day, like, how often do you take a day off? And I was like, what do you mean a day off? And he's like, how often do you like not do anything? I was like, well, like usually like one day a week I won't work out, but I'll surf or I'll go for a run. And he's like, no, like, do you ever like take a day off? And I was like sometimes like I'll literally like just do an easy surf. And he's like, no, do you ever like do nothing? Like, and no. He's like, just do me a favor. No. Leading up to this next fight, just every Sunday, don't do anything. You can go for a walk and that's it. Yeah. And all of a sudden my workouts on Thursday, Friday and Saturday, which are like the harder days through your training week, didn't feel so bad anymore.
Yeah.
And it was like, that was like one of those first light bulbs that kind of started to go off. Like, okay, like if I actually rest and recover, like I'm getting more out of my training week.
Right.
You're training, especially in those days, I was working full-time jobs. I'd this gym, this training session, that training session, back to clients. Like you're all over the place trying to eat as well as I could. And then kind of at that same time, I like really started to dial my nutrition in, really started to understand food quantity and food quality. I was started weighing and measuring, and started using weighing and measuring to do my weight cuts. So like all of that stuff.
So you were more calculated and less like dice roll on that stuff.
Yes, and like I always had a pretty good understanding of it just from reading and self-educating through some of my education. But as I kind of started to learn more and kind of like really dial it in, I kind of started to lean way heavier on that science-based approach. My training started to get more science-based. I started to understand like really like what the energy systems were doing and how they needed to be trained. And it was kind of like, so I guess like my recovery and kind of my understanding of all of the things that were going to make me a better athlete all kind of started to come together around that same time. And all of a sudden, right, I started to understand like truly like the importance of that aerobic base, which so many fighters skip.
Yeah. Because they just spar or they just run.
Spar or it's all, I got to do sprints. I got to do this. They didn't want to go put the miles in because putting miles in sucks.
It's horrible.
Right? Like,
and there's that weird trade-off as an athlete where when everything that you do has an opportunity cost. Because if you're going to run, you could be strength training. If you're going to strength train, you could be running. If you're going to do either, you could be sparring. So there's like, you're constantly juggling what you could be doing. And I think as the young athlete, what you do is you go, I got to train hard. And that's always, I mean, I can, when I was competing and singing, that's all I cared about. I thought that every moment should be spent training harder because no one was telling me otherwise. I didn't have a facility like this where you could go and just recover and not do, like, advised not to do anything else. And I didn't have people in my life, even the top level athletes that I looked up to and I really aspired to be like, none of them were talking about taking care of yourself. It was just days in the weight room, days on the hill, days in the weight room, days on the hill. And then that cycle repeated infinity times through the off season until you could get back on snow. When you having the perspective that you have of being in the United States, competing, training in a gym where, let's be honest, some of the gnarliest killers in mixed martial arts you weren't at Bob's boxing gym down the street, right? You're training with really top-notch guys, and then going overseas. Did you see a difference at all in how the two worlds thought about striking and thought about recovering and thought about training modalities?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the MMA gym and kind of the MMA world, especially in the United States, it was essentially that. Like even, I mean, I was coming up 2006, 2007, 2008 was like when I was like really kind of like spinning in the Team Quest zone, and probably like all the way to 2010. And it was train harder, train more, spar harder. I mean, we used to have, I think it was Monday nights. It was like Deathmatch Monday. Like
Sign me up.
That it was called, and it was 5-minute rounds with people like roughly at your weight class.
And it was hard.
And it was, I mean, you were fighting. You were fighting every Monday. And I would do it because I didn't know any better.
Well, and there's probably that mental side where like if you don't go and your teammates go,
yeah, then you're a bitch.
They get it right. They get another one on you, right?
Yeah. So you have that, and then at the same time, like kind of with the recovery talk, like, and then on Tuesday you were expected to show up in the morning and train, and then on Tuesday night and do it and train again. Yeah. And there wasn't like in between. You should be getting soft tissue work and doing this and doing that. Like towards the end, they started to bring in some different people, and all of a sudden, like there was somebody there that would like stretch me out before or after the session, right? And like you're like, okay, right? Like I don't have to do this by myself, and I'm not the only one over here stretching. And like so, you kind of started to build and started to pick up. It was, I mean, this is almost 15 years ago, and it's very different from what people are doing now. It's way more dialed in, especially in the big MMA gyms. But like going over to Thailand, they train really, really hard, but they train really smart. And a lot of that is because of the fight frequency, like you were talking about earlier. So like you get there and you wake up at 6 a.m. or before 6 a.m. Huh?
Pad Thai.
Pad Thai first thing in the morning. No, not even a little bit. First thing in the morning, no food. You're off on 5 to 10 kilometer run, like depending
fasted
on the
cardio.
Yeah. And then you come back and then you're going to hit like a 2-hour actual training session. So you got like roughly 3 hours in the morning. And then this is where it kind of starts to change, right? Then it's like shower, eat, take a nap, eat, lay down, do nothing, hang out, relax, train again, do it all over again in the afternoon. At night, rest, eat, sleep, and do it again. You do that 6 days a week. Sunday, nothing. So it's like, while you're still training hard and it like is kind of like old school in some ways, they are way smarter and they know way more than it looks like when you look at videos of like some of the Thai camps, or you look at some of their schedules. Like they have it figured out really well. And then all of a sudden, like you have a fight coming up and you have a fight on the calendar, and then you get done training and they'll work you and beat you down. And you finish your ab work, and they're like, lay down, like in the ring. One of the trainers would come over, full massage.
Yeah.
And then a couple nights a week they would do, and it sounds super weird, but basically like a hot water and soap massage. So they like lay you on like this wooden, like almost like a chase lounge. Yeah. And they lay you down there, and they have this big giant bucket of water and soap, and everybody that's fighting, like boom, 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 everybody's getting like 15 minutes of body work, and that's a couple days a week. So like you kind of start to see that, like,
well, the accumulation of care is
all of a sudden, like it's a little bit different. And like you talk about like some dude's rubbing you down with hot water and soap in the States, and people are going to be like, oh, gross, don't touch me. And the first time that I was in Thailand, I was at a camp where there was a lot of young kids. And I started to see like how interesting it was. But like these kids that are like 14, 15, 16 years old, like one of them's got a fight coming up, and like in between rounds, like one person's like pouring water, rubbing shoulders down, one person's rubbing their legs out before they hit their next pad round, because it starts to mimic like what they get in their fight. And like think about like a 15, 16-year-old boy in the United States like massaging their buddy, like not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. There's just like cultural norms that stand in the way.
So like with the recovery side, like it just starts to look different, and it starts to carry the things that are actually needed. Like there's this like self-care or just like care in general that you're getting. And in order to train like they do, in order to train as much as they do and fight as much as they do, you can't do it if you're not taking care of yourself.
Right. What a novel idea.
Right. Like the way, like the other camps that I was at, it was like live there, eat there, sleep there. So like the food, the way that they feed you, everything's like fresh. Like they're bringing a chicken in, plucking chickens. Like they have gardens, they're pulling vegetables, or the vegetable truck pulls up. So like everything is just very different, and like the quality of food and the quality of care, even though from an outside perspective it doesn't look like it, and you don't really realize it until you kind of like immerse yourself in it, and you're there and you're like, oh, like, and the last time I was there, I was 32 years old. Like, so like I'm on the old end, and I'm training 6 days a week, 6 hours a day, and I fought 3 or 4 times. I think I fought at one point 3 times in 4 weeks. Like,
it's crazy.
So, like, fast
I think
forward.
that the part of the problem in the States is like it's all behind closed doors. Like your example of this is really interesting because it's all right in your face, right? You train in the ring, you get massaged in the ring. Everyone's doing it. You're learning about this care system that's kind of baked into how they do stuff. You see the players on the field, they go to the locker room. You see the players on the pitch, they go to the locker room. You see people in the gym, they go to the showers. It's like there's never anything showing the room that we're in right now, which is this is in every single major sports team's facility, is a spot dedicated solely to care, from manual therapy to Eastern medicine modalities to cold therapy, heat therapy. American Top Team is doing this. The UPI is doing this. They're expanding all over the world. It's just that there's been that, like there wasn't that shift yet. People weren't curious because I also think less people in general that were outside of the athlete world didn't really have a reason. It's like what they did, like the jazzercise class for 30 minutes, right? And they were like, oh, I feel good. Or I walked around my neighborhood. But now people are training. People are training like they mean it. And when you do that, you don't have the luxury of not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, so and I think it's exactly that. As much as like I'll be the first one to gripe on social media and people spend too much time on their phones and the internet, but because of all that, there's so much more information available, right? Like I've been sitting in an ice bath for a long, long time because I knew that the benefits were there because of the people that I was surrounding myself, and I was out there seeking it out to compete at the highest level, going back to what we were talking about as a little kid. Like all I ever wanted to do is be the best, and I was willing to sacrifice and do whatever it took to be there. I saw the best fighters getting in garbage cans full of ice water. Like I was going to do it too. As I did it, I started to figure out why this works. And now you have people like Andrew Huberman, who has a social media presence. He has a podcast. He's all over the place. He's on Joe Rogan's podcast telling everybody this is why the ice bath is important. And then you get all the influencers that have podcasts that are doing it and picking up on it and having this benefit and that benefit, everything from fat loss to increased emotional state to better sex lives to like anything and everything under the sun, like hot, cold therapy seems to fix. Yeah. Right? If you look at nature, if an animal gets hurt in the wild, they have a wound, what do? They go find cold water and put the wound in cold water. Right? It's like it's something that's inherent and natural to what we do, but as humans, we like to get away from everything because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
And my wife and I actually talk about it a lot, is like, in order to get somebody to sit in the ice bath, you were just talking about it earlier, that you have to give somebody the benefits. You have to speak their language, right? If I'm training women and I want them to get in the ice bath because I know about all the benefits, like I can tell them it's going to do this and it's going to do that. But as soon as I tell them like, hey, there's a fat loss protocol, it will help you burn brown fat. We're going to do this, this, and this. They're sold instantly.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just that connection point.
Because there's that aesthetic that they're after, like, and then all of a sudden, like, you have your athletes, and you're like, hey, you're going to be able to train harder tomorrow because
you can lift
that if
more.
we train harder, we're going to be better. So you're able to put them in that. And that's like the little differences that you have to do is you have to be able to speak somebody's language and give them that why this is important, why you need to suffer for 3 to 5 minutes every day, because the benefit will be so much bigger than how bad it sucks.
Well, and that's just an upfront speed bump. I mean, when you do this kind of stuff, you become addicted to the sensation, and there's obviously, hormonal releases that are going on in your body at the same time as a result of how cold it really is or how hot it is. And that's felt as a benefit. It's not just talked about. Like, maybe it's tough the first time you do it, but after a couple of times you kind of crave it. To touch on the social media part, how do you sift through the BS? I mean, you and I, right, we've both spent a large part of our lives invested in this kind of thing, thinking about training from a high level, about how to keep people healthy, how to look at their nutrition, their movement, their recovery, and interweave all those things into their life so that they can live a quote optimal life. Knowing what you know and seeing what you see, what's the filter for this kind of stuff? And how do you advise people on how to make decisions around social media? Because there is some valuable stuff.
Yeah, there's a ton of people that put out a ton of great content. I like to think that the things that I put out are valuable for people. The things that you're putting out are valuable. My partners in Miami, David Alexander and Donnie Raymond, they talk about qualifying your information.
Yeah.
Like, who is this person and why should you be listening to them? Do they have reputable sources? Like, are they citing scientific journals? So our partner Donnie, he's a biomechanist. Right. So like, he doesn't do anything if it's not backed by the science, and that's speaks highly to me, because I'm a numbers guy. Like, I want to see the facts. Like, I don't want somebody's opinion telling me what to do or what not to do. So like, when you start to look through social media, like, as soon as somebody says, I do this, so you should do it too, that's like a major red flag right off the bat, right? Just because I do something, the way that I eat, the way that I train, the way that I do my recovery is probably not ideal for most other people, because most other people don't live my life.
Right.
Or as soon as somebody has all this stuff and then there's a link to buy something, it's probably a red flag. Like, look for those people that are citing a scientific journal. Look for people that have those reputable sources. Andrew Huberman, right? Like, everything that he talks about has some sort of science attached to it. You look at like what you put out, like, you're very much like, this is the science. This is what I do. I don't recommend that you just follow me blindly, but I'm giving you some ideas. So like, I very much like that, because that inspires people, it motivates people. But what you want, like, when you're looking through the social media world and even Google searches, is like, if you really want to know something, you have to go to the science and be aware of people that are like, oh, this is from this journal. If they didn't actually have access to that journal, they're probably just giving you the abstract from the front. And this is all stuff that I've learned, like, since being a part of DBC, right? Like, people will be like, I don't know, like, we'll just sit in the ice bath for 15 minutes and it will have this benefit. And then, like, if you actually read that journal article, there might be something in there that disproves it, where like, you actually only need to sit in there for 3 minutes to get the same impact.
Well, I think this is a problem of experts. Like, you do need experts. We need experts. We want academic experts. That's a good thing for society. It's important for you and I as coaches to be able to look up the ladder and see someone who knows more than we do, accept that and learn from them and understand that difference. So like, there is a difference between a coach who's been coaching for 17 years, who is immersed in the data around training and the different modalities, also aware of their blind spots. That's a person to listen to. That's a person to learn from. But someone who's brand new, who's doing a partnership with some energy bar that promises X, Y, and Z, and they happen to be really strong, and so they accredit all their strength to something that has nothing to do with it. Anything that's like connected where it doesn't make any sense, you have to be really wary of that stuff. And it's in abundance online. Everyone's trying to sell snake oil.
Yeah, and that's, and I'm very much like at heart, like I really feel like I'm a coach, and I really appreciate good coaching. Nick from
Yep.
that owns the gym, the way that he coaches is so good, and I appreciate it so much because it's like progression, progression, progression. And here's some things to think about. Here's some things that I like to do from here, but I want you to think about what you like to do from there, right? So he's like giving you like the base understanding of it, and then he's giving you some ideas and some things to think about. So he's like making you a better practitioner because it's not like just do this move.
Yeah.
It's like, and in all fairness, like in his beginner classes, it's like do this move, do this move, do this
Right.
move. When he gets to like the mixed classes, he wants to get people to be better at jiu-jitsu, not better at doing the move. And jiu-jitsu, right, is all about like having an understanding and then being able to like have that creative touch. And I think that's one of those things. And kind of coming back to the don't trust people that are trying to like say that this is the only way, right? Jiu-jitsu is like the perfect example. The way that I set up an arm bar is going to be very different than the way that somebody else sets up an arm bar. Me and you, we basically have the same game, so we do exactly the same thing all the time. But most people, right, like there's little varied pieces in there. And if there's a coach saying that this is the way to do it and this is the only way to do it, they're wrong.
Well, this is my biggest gripe in the fitness world, and I think just in the world in general, is anything that is dogmatic. If you're telling me that there's only a black and a white to every situation, I instantaneously don't trust you. Because as I've learned more things in my life about my own profession and learned that I know a lot less than I know, it means there's tons to be learned. And for that reason alone, you have to stay open-minded about everything. So it could be something simple like a technique in jiu-jitsu, or it could be a training principle. And the fact that things change and they evolve and science fails forward, it means that those kind of things are good situations. It's good to have options and the ability to grow. But when someone tells you it's only this way, it's like a surefire sign that it's definitely not.
Yeah, 100%. And I think jiu-jitsu is like an interesting one to like kind of use as the analogies, right? Because there are like certain things, like when you do an arm bar, like whether you're top, bottom, like from the back, whatever, like there's a couple things that have to happen. Like if you want to get an arm bar on somebody,
to physically lock the
like,
joint,
you have to have their thumb up, right? There's like those little things that have to be there. And then like you go to movement in general, and there's like certain ways, like if you do this when you squat or deadlift, like you will fuck your knees up.
Yeah.
If you do this, or this, you will fuck your back up.
Yep.
But if you keep all of this in position, you can have some variance there.
Yep.
But those things like have to be there. So there's like these like pieces that are like concrete, science-based, like period, the end. Like you can't armbar somebody if you're pulling the elbow like the wrong way. That's just not going to happen. Like once you start to understand that, and you understand like those key pieces, that's where you start to get the freedom, right? A good coach, trainer, whatever, like if I just have somebody squat, lunge, push, pull, like basic movements every day, they're not coming back to me day after day, week after week, month after month, because they're going to get bored. I know that there's like really only like so many movements that we're doing, but I just add some variance and I give them a slightly different way to do it that's going to challenge their system slightly differently, right? There's like all those little pieces in like martial arts, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, like the way that like I have 4 different ways that I throw a jab. Mm-hmm. They're all a jab, and there's like some base pieces that have to be there, but there's some variance depending on the scenario that I'm in that moment. Like there's something else might have to come up.
I think of like the deadlift is a good example. Not to hone in on one exercise and get stuck here in the weeds, but you know, when you're brand new to fitness, you've never done anything, and you want to get stronger and you want to become more capable in life, a deadlift is a great thing to learn how to do. It's how do I get something off the floor up into the air and put it on top of a countertop, in a car, into my backpack, whatever it is. It's just like it's a very good functional thing to understand how to do. When you're learning, it can be really important to keep your back flat. That can be a great part of the technique. But if you look to the best lifters in the world, anyone who's ever set a record, they have some degree of spinal flexion in their lumbar. Do you want to tell the brand new lifter that they should be allowing spinal flexion when they feel like it? Absolutely not. I mean, the margin for error is massive. But to your point, as you develop the skill and you get further along that track, you are able to now have the freedom to start to do things that are maybe more complex. And I think that's like such an important part of training. And it's something that I think people can look forward to, because it isn't just push, pull, lunge, squat, deadlift, right? There's so much more things that you can do down the line if you're dedicated to honing in on these skills in the beginning. I think that's one of the reasons that I love what you guys are doing here so much at DBC, is that you're invested in that process, right? A lot of trainers are invested in the hour and the money, and they're invested in making people sweat, making things hard. That doesn't build longevity in someone's life. It doesn't make them a more capable person when they go home and play with their kids. It doesn't allow them to take up interests that they didn't have before, like triathlon and running and doing things that you can do for the rest of their life. But when you invest in those kind of things at the ground level, this person is now becoming capable, which is a very different product of training.
Yeah, and that's essentially like why we expanded and went from just having the training side to having the recovery side. Is we work with athletes, and it's really nice for the athlete to kind of have like a one-stop shop, but it's almost more important for the mom and the busy corporate office people, because they don't have time to go here for their training and then go somewhere else for their chiropractic adjustment and then try to track down an ice bath or have to go stop and get ice or deal with all that stuff at home. Like that is the beauty of what we're doing, is like there's this simplicity to, you just come here and you do everything that you need to do for your health and wellness and longevity and performance or whatever it is that you're after. And the other thing is, people that start to come here, they understand that we have a very science-based approach, and there's not like all this like extra complication around everything, right? Like how many different things have you seen on social media in the last 3 weeks about how you should eat, or the different times that you should be in the ice bath, or that you should do this for your recovery or that? Like there's so much BS out there. It's like, it's so hard for the average person to know what to do. So most people just don't do anything.
Yeah. The worst outcome.
So like, it's really a very simple thing, from the way that you need to train to the way that you need to recover, right? Like if I get somebody to sit in the ice bath and all they have time for is we do 55 minutes in the training room, and I can get them to come over here and do 3 minutes in the ice bath 3 to 4 days a week, like they will see benefits from that.
Facts.
They don't need to sit in the ice bath and then sit in the sauna and then sit in the ice bath and then do this and then do that. Right. Like just get them in the ice bath for 3 minutes. And if that's all they have time for, that's all they have time for. And the benefits are so much greater than overcomplicating it and telling them that they need 30 minutes because you're trying to get an extra half hour on your session price or whatever. Like,
yeah.
And I think that's what we've really tried to instill in the way that we do things. And like, we've been super fortunate with our partners in Miami, is they've kind of already laid the groundwork for it. The San Diego community is very different than the community in Miami. So we have some things that look a little bit different, but the overall process and kind of the overall kind of guiding principles that we're doing like through DBC are the same. Yeah. And it's giving people a place where things are simple and they're science-based and nobody's going to BS anybody. Like, do you have to pay for it? Yes. Like everything costs something. Are our trainers more expensive than the guy that's training you out of the park? Like, yes, absolutely we are. Like, does it cost money to have a recovery membership? Yes, it does. But what you're going to get out of it is going to save you so much long term.
Well, it's not even a promo to say. This is true. If you are invested at all in doing anything athletic, whether you are a runner, an Olympic weightlifter, a grappler, a striker, it literally doesn't matter what you do. If you are having output You have to have recovery. You do, because what people don't realize is the best athletes in the world they're all doing it. They just might not all be talking about it the way that like Andrew Huberman is talking about it. They might not be doing a video like Joe Rogan is, where it gets, 60 million views of him just sitting in his sauna or this cold plunge, but they're all doing it. They're all recovering because it is an essential, non-negotiable part of being an athlete. You can't have constant output if you're not taking a step back. And I'm sure you struggle from this too. It's very hard to do as someone who loves training, because I would much rather, in my perfect world, get another day of training in, another day of, pushing myself and the physical output, then take a step back. But every single time I do, whether I'm forced to, whether it's because of travel, the sessions after that time spent away are always the best ones. It's where you're the fastest, the strongest, you jump the highest, you feel the best. And the kind of things that you guys are offering at this place, it is everything that people need that they didn't know that they needed. And it takes nothing more than one time doing it to totally feel, it's instant gratification on recovery, because if you do stuff, your body feels banged up. It's just part of it. You go for a long run, what happens? Your calves get tight, your hamstrings get tight, your hip flexors get tight. What does sauna and cold plunge and foam rolling and percussion therapy and Normatec boots do? It undoes all of that. But it's all in one roof. Like I don't think people understand.
It's
so valuable.
Here's the crazy thing, right? Like as athletes and people that have competed at such a high level, like people, like I get the question all the time: do you train people that aren't athletes? And like the simple answer is yes. But like in general, like this place is almost more valuable for the non-athlete.
Totally.
For just the general population client, mom, banker, firefighter, like whatever, because when you sit and do nothing, people that are commuting, like I would rather have some of those people just come in here and get an ice bath in the sauna at the end of their day than train, because mentally it's going to do way more for them, right? It's going to de-stress, decompress. It's going to do wonders for their joints. Yeah. And those are those little pieces where like people kind of get mixed up. We had one of our trainers' clients the other day. She's like, I haven't been able to get in since we opened. She's been in religiously, like every night. She'll come in here for 30 minutes before she trains, and ice bath, sauna, and kind of go through the whole thing. And she was like, it was last Thursday, I think. She's like, I haven't been able to come in all week. I haven't been able to do anything. I feel terrible. Yeah. Right? And
you feel how everyone else feels before they start.
And that's how most people live their life. They do nothing. Yeah. And if you can just get somebody, I'm sure there's some science out there on it, but somebody does nothing. They don't work out. They get in their car. They drive to work. They sit at their desk all day. There's
a lot of science out on that.
Right? We know what's going on to those people, but if you could just get them to make a pit stop here on their way to work or on their way home, sit in the ice bath for 3 minutes, do nothing else, I bet you their whole body changes.
Well, it's like a positive circle of reinforcement too. Rhonda Patrick talks about this too, who's another awesome source in the social media landscape of like actually valuable information, of just like the baseline benefits of sauna use, right? For people that, if you have a contraindication to exercise, let's say that you can't run, you can't walk long distances for whatever reason, but you can get into a sauna protocol where you start to build that endurance within the sauna, your heart rate's going to elevate. It's going to be sustained for the duration that you're in there. And so now you're getting real life benefits from non-exercise from the sauna, which you weren't before. So literally what you're saying is true. Like you could be someone who is on their commute on the way home, and you stop in and you do stuff that's not working out, that may seem odd to you, but it can have physiological benefits, mental benefits. And I think this is a really, like, personally, I think this is a cool part about what you guys are doing. And I'm biased because of the proximity to training, but there's an opportunity for community. And when you build community around positive habits in anything in life, again, it's that reinforcement.
Yeah, I mean, right. And that's why CrossFit was so successful, right? And
yeah.
I mean, they've messed some things up over the years, but like the one thing that they've done is they've built an amazing community around something that at one point was like driven around health and kind of lost that. But like that, the community piece is amazing. That's why so many people go to the jiu-jitsu places. Like, they don't want to miss out. They don't want to miss a day of training when everybody else is there and walk in and not have that. I know for me, the reason that I love going over to the gym is the proximity, but I also know that there's no egos in that gym, and like the people in there are cool, and I can go in there and I can train and not get hurt. Like, I'm at a point in my life where I've been there and done it, and getting hurt training is like the last thing that I need in my life, right? Like, I want to be able to play with my daughter and pick my daughter up and roll around on the ground and do all the things that she wants to do. And I've been in gyms where like you're getting hurt, like period, the end. So like, if you're in a gym like that, you really probably need recovery. But I think the other side is like, you just have to kind of have a place that gives you something that makes you feel good. And I don't I'm not trying to sell this place, because there's going to be people that are listening to this that don't live here. Like, but like, people just need to be doing the things every day that make them feel better. And most people that have that type A personality that just want to go hard all day, they probably work a job that's high stress, and then their workout is probably high stress. And we know that that's a recipe for disaster, right? Their cortisol levels are raised all day at work, and then their workout raises their cortisol levels, and now they're fucked. Whereas their workout should be down regulating in some way. They should be doing something that brings them back into like a down state instead of that up state, especially if they're working out in the afternoon, evening, sleep cycles. Like, you talk about sleep cycles and stuff a lot, but like, those are the things that I think get really missed in the health, fitness, training, whatever world. You look at a lot of the guys that are doing jiu-jitsu, like, it's a lot of type A personalities. Like, they're in there and they're kind of like that, like rah, rah, rah. And they want to be better. They want to compete. And I think some of them, like, they might be better off to have a different attitude when they go in to train and relax and kind of like do jiu-jitsu for what it is. It's like a relaxed art. And that's not to say, like, especially like my style, the way that you roll, like there's athletic movements in there, but like, there's not like aggression through training.
It doesn't, I don't feel like aggression, like ego just doesn't have that much of a place, I feel like, on the jiu-jitsu mats, because there's always someone that could just trounce that. Like, I feel like in most cases, maybe if like the best person isn't there that day, but if someone walked in and they were like a total dickhead and they were wearing it on their sleeve, let's say Darwin's hip's fine, no problem at all, right? That person would just get checked instantly. They get checked. And I think that's one of the things that makes this so amazing. It taught me a lot about who I am. That's for damn sure. And I don't mean to like spit the gospel of jiu-jitsu, but like, it definitely had a big impact on down regulating me as a whole, despite it being a constant output, but kind of checking myself and being like, okay, there are levels to this on all levels, and strength and athleticism is good, but it doesn't transition the way that you think it does. There's a lot to be learned here. And it was actually jiu-jitsu, a desire to get better at jiu-jitsu, that made me finally give a shit about taking care of myself. Because I'm a train 6 day a week, stay up before this, past me was train 6-7 days a week, stay up late, eat a ton of food. I don't need sleep, blah, 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 blah. And then when you're in an environment that's not truly testing that, you kind of float along. The second you get in an environment that's really dynamic, where people are trying to fight you and you're trying to fight them in whatever capacity that's happening, and you definitely upregulate with certain people and you don't with others, your body starts to feel it. And it was really this last year and a half where I really started to be like, I am going to put an effort into truly taking care of my body to a way that I really wish I did when I was Olympic weightlifting. I wish I did when I was training all the time. Because when you do, it makes a massive difference in your well-being, in your ability to sleep even, right? Because your body's not just throttled 24/7 on 7,000 RPMs. It's like you can take a step back a little bit, and then everything gets better. Your training gets better. Your mood gets better. Being present for other people in your life gets better. It's so many benefits from investing in taking care of yourself. And that's applicable to the everyman.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, it's like, right, like for me, like fighting taught me so much just about life in general, and I look back and all the lessons and stuff that I've learned, and I'm like, man, if I knew than what I know now. Like my fight career would have been totally different. Number one, I maybe would have still been fighting if I was taking care of myself. Like, and I would say that I was on like the front of taking care of myself, but not even close to what I would have, like, if I went back to my 23-year-old self now, like I would have been in better shape. My nutrition would have been even better. Right. My recovery would have been better. Like all the things, right? It's easy to look back and say all that. But when you start to kind of talk about this ability to recover and this understanding and like the things that you get as you mature, right? Like when I was in Thailand, the way that they train and the way that they hit the pads really hard. They hit the bags really hard. But sparring is fun.
It's like technical.
Like, have
smart.
you ever seen like videos of people sparring in Thailand? They're like smiling, like no mouthpiece on. Like Sanchai has like one of the best like social media ever.
That's
like
great, dude.
His
So seminars are hilarious.
Like he's like typically like sparring with no shin guards on, like no mouthpiece, just like cruising around having fun. And that's how sparring is over there. It's fun. Like even clinch, like we would do like 20 minutes of clinch straight, like new person every minute, and you're just moving around, and it's like everyone's laughing and having a good time, but you're working your ass off. Yeah. And the amount that you raise your skill and your technique by doing that is so far beyond what happens when you're fighting.
But could you say that, like, so in the MMA world though, would you say that there's some benefit to not being that? Like if you're training at Team Quest, there's some benefit to training the way that like Sean Strickland trains, right? For that sport. Or would you argue that
I would say no. Like I think you should be fighting enough in your early years that you're getting that like test to learn, and that's like why the amateur stuff's good now, because like you could go and you could lose 10 fights as an amateur because you were learning and trying new stuff, and then figure it all out and then turn pro, and you could win 10 fights in a row, and now you're somebody that's valuable. Right. But if you're in Thailand, it's they're fighting 2 or 3 times a week when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Right. That's why they have 300 plus fights by the time they're 17, 18. Like my last fight in Thailand, I fought a guy that was like 330 fights.
How'd that go?
Knocked him out with an elbow.
Nice.
That was my last fight. That's how I retired. Like
good. Go out on your.
I went out on a high note. I fought. It was like national Thai TV.
Yeah.
And this guy was no slouch, and but I was better. Like I was stronger. I was more conditioned. Like the whole thing, right? Like I just had a different attitude. Yeah. But like that, they have so many fights. So like you look at somebody like Sean Strickland. I don't know how many fights he's had. He's world champion in the UFC. Can't knock the guy.
Right.
But if he took some of that energy and put it into some technical work and sparred a little bit lighter, and he wasn't as banged up as much, like could he have been a world champion 3 or 4 years ago?
Right. You
Maybe.
Don't know. Yeah.
Right. Like who knows? And like let's see what happens. Like I don't know how old he is, but like let's see like the longevity of a career.
I think that's the concern for sure.
That's like the big difference is longevity, right? Like as an athlete, the longer you're an athlete, the more money you make, the more valuable your name is. As a general human on the planet, the healthier you can be, the longer you are, the better quality of life that you have. Yeah. And I think those are the things that like I look back and I've really learned from, and that's why my life looks the way that it does right now. Like I want to be able to surf as much as I can, and if I go on a surf trip, I want to be able to surf nonstop. Yep. And if I get home from riding my bike to work, training people all day, doing jiu-jitsu, riding my bike home, and if my little girl wants to go run around in the backyard or go to the park or do this, like I'm going to be able to do that. Like I don't want to have to ever say no. And when you start to have that mindset, the way that you train becomes very different.
Totally.
Right? I don't do the things that I know are going to hurt me. There's things that I like to do, but I just don't do them anymore.
Yeah, you probably love to spar, but sparring every day of the week probably isn't the best thing if that's what your focus is.
And when I train jiu-jitsu, like there's things that like I'll just tap because like
Why?
Like, maybe I could fight out of it, but like, I got caught in a position that I shouldn't have been in anyway. So like, I might as well tap out, learn from it, make a mental note, don't do it again, and then move on and figure it out, rather than like, maybe I'm out a week, maybe I'm out 2 weeks, maybe I'm out a month, maybe
you never roll again because it was bad, right?
And it took me a long time to get here. Like, having my little girl definitely changed the way that I looked at life. And I mean, I retired in 2016, and then I had like tried to go in and train a couple times, and I was just like, I can't do this. And then what year is it? 2023. Right?
A lot of CTE over there.
So 2016 to 2023, I finally have like been able to be in there consistently, and I've taken a much different attitude. If I show up late because I have a client, I just roll in and I get as much out of the days that I'm in there as I can. I have fun with it. I have no ego, and like, I'm learning. I'm having a good time. People look at me and think that I'm just a blue belt because that's what color my belt is. Right. And then I typically like get people that don't know me that try to go way harder than they think that they should, because they think I'm a regular blue, whatever. And I think it's just a interesting time in my life, especially to be training. I know what my goals are. I know why I'm doing it. And I think that's really like what matters. And it's the same thing I tell all my clients, like, know why you're here. And if you understand why you're here, the investment becomes worthwhile, and it's easier to come in and make those sacrifices, whether it's the money that you're spending or the time that you're spending or the little bit of uncomfortableness that you're feeling getting in the ice bath every day, whatever. But like, those are the things that I think get missed, and especially in the younger generation or the people that haven't done anything at a high level, and they're just like still trying to hold on to that, like, well, I'm going to go hard because I have something to prove attitude. And I think from a professional standpoint, like, I know that I'm way better off because I get to surround myself with a bunch of great trainers that have a bunch of skills that I maybe don't have, or have a background that I don't have, and I get to learn from them. I go in and roll. I would prefer to roll with brown belts and black belts and get smashed all day long because I learn way more that way. And I was the same way when I was fighting. Like, I was not the best in the gym, but come fight night, I knew how to turn it on, and I knew how to win. Yeah. Because I wasn't afraid to put myself in bad positions, and I wasn't afraid to lose in the gym.
Well, that's a really important part in anything in life, is being able to stomach loss and then not let it destroy you, because you're going to experience it on a lot of different levels. You experience on a life level, losing people that you love. You're going to experience it in a training setting when you can't do things that you want to do. You'll definitely experience it if you do martial arts, because you're going to get beat by people you think that you're better than, and that's part of the process. But that whole ability, I think it separates interesting people from uninteresting people, is a willingness to take an L and go forward with it. Or same thing, tap and learn from it, not just tap and get frustrated and storm off the mats, but what happened there? What was the opportunity? What did I miss? How did I end up in this position? Can we workshop that? Can we get through it? And that's a valuable skill to take anywhere. And that the goal that you set, I mean, that's like the underpinning of my life, is a willingness to say yes to anything. And the examples that you give are examples that I've lived in real life, from surf trips to playing with like nephews and cousins. And, you know, I want to be a father soon, one day. And that's a big part of my ethos, is like, I don't want to be a dad. You know, by the time I have a 20-year-old, if I had him today, I'm going to be 54. I don't want to be busted ass 54-year-old who like can't keep up. So lame, dude. Like, how unexciting about life to just be like a no, you go play with your friends kind of attitude. No, like I never want to say no because I didn't do the things necessary that were available to take care of myself to be in that position. From jiu-jitsu to strength training to whatever. Just like, if someone calls me and they ask me if I want to go do some shit, I want to say yeah. That's literally why I train. It's the only reason, besides the mental benefit and the love for it, of how it makes me feel. But I go into the gym twice a week, every single week since I was 16, because I never want to have to answer that phone call if it's in my power and say no, because I didn't fucking take care of myself.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's like, I've never had to do it. That's not true. I had one fight that I couldn't take because I had just got knocked out, and it was like outside of my control, but it's still, and this was 15, maybe longer than that ago, and it still like eats at me that I couldn't take that fight. And
but that's out of
I had to give it.
That's
a
medical.
But at the same time, if I would have taken care of myself better and I didn't get knocked out, then I wouldn't have had to say no to that fight. But like, those are those little pieces that, right, take the lessons from fighting and move them on to everything else, right? Yeah. Somebody asked me to go on a surf trip. Cool. I'm in.
You're there.
Somebody asked me to do this. Cool. I'm in. Like, if I wanted to compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament tomorrow, like, I could go and do it.
Yeah.
I don't have any desire to compete. Or Darwin was trying to get me to go to Vegas in November to compete, and I laughed at him and said, I'm not into that. And like, because my goals in jiu-jitsu are very different, right? Like, I have nothing to prove to anybody other than myself. Right. And I see people in there, and like, I don't know everybody in there, and I don't know their stories, but like, you walk in there right now and there's 3, 4, 5, 6 guys off and on wandering in that just had shoulder surgery.
I know.
Right?
Don't get me started on the neck shoulder situation.
So, and I have no idea what their background is, but to kind of prove my point, and like, to kind of, for the sake of the conversation, like, what is that doing to their life, right? Surgery's expensive.
Well,
are they taking time off of work? Like, was it avoidable? Was it avoidable because they could have just checked their ego and tapped? Was it avoidable if they would have just taken it upon themselves to do some self-care, whether it's stretching, an ice bath and sauna, or lifting some weights, or running, or being better with their nutrition? Like, those are the things that, like, I see, and I'm just like, you could be so much better. And
well, I think the problem is that people, I really feel for people in those situations, and I talk to them probably as much as you do. It's like, a lot of people just don't know, like they're like, hey man, what should I do for how many people do you know that have a neck injury and a shoulder injury for real? Like, that are showing, I had to stop someone the other day. I'm like, dude, don't stop training. Like, your neck, you just told me your neck's hurt. Like, how bad is it? A 7 out of 10? Get off the mats. Like,
because
you don't know.
They feel like they have something to prove, and I think that's one of the
or
things.
It's their only outlet,
and
so they slate all the chips onto that without understanding that to do something athletically dynamic, you have to have these other pieces in place.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, people have to do the same thing with you that they do with me, where, like, especially when I walked in there, right? I was walking in April with a blue belt with no stripes on it. Like, nobody knew who I was. I don't like other than my nose, until you kind of talk to me, like, you don't look at me and go like, oh, you're a fighter. Like, I'm just in there, like, just like everybody else. Yeah. But I grab onto a purple belt or a brown belt or a black belt, and at best they're not submitting me, right? Or I'm dominating positions on them, or I'm submitting them. Like, that technically should not happen, right?
But you have a history.
Right. Yeah. But I do have a history in some ways, right? Like, I trained, and I'm not, like, technically, like, time-wise on the mat, I'm probably not really a blue belt. I'm probably beyond that. But the first thing that I would do in my head is be like, what is that guy doing? I need to do that too, because I should be better, right? Like, when you grab onto me, right, and you start to move, there's a speed and a strength and an athleticism that's there that isn't there with a lot of the other people that do jiu-jitsu. And this isn't just our gym. This is people training jiu-jitsu all over the place. And I've trained with people all over the world. And there's this, like, really interesting thing. Like, when you grapple with somebody that's strong, and I don't mean like, oh, they lift weights and strong, but they have, like, they've done something other than jiu-jitsu their whole life, right? Yeah. There's something really interesting about the way that person moves, and the way, and like the strength and the heaviness that they have comparatively to somebody that only does jiu-jitsu,
Totally.
right? Like, I can grab onto somebody and like at the end of the day, like I will dominate the positions even though I'm technically worse, but because I'm stronger.
Yeah. Well,
And
they say like it's silly when you get involved in jiu-jitsu, someone along the line very early on is going to tell you, don't use strength, use your skill, right? Which is hilarious because you don't have any skill because you just started. But it should really say, use the fuck out of your strength, just use it at the right time. That's what you really want to do. And when you roll with somebody who's athletic, especially as the skill level goes on and they've been doing it for longer, that's what you're feeling. You're feeling someone who is strong, but they're not using their strength all the time. They're using it sometimes when it's an advantage, and that's overwhelming.
well, and like so, and like the other pieces are like my 50%, right? Like
Might be someone's 80.
so right, and like, and this is, and like I don't lift like I used to. There was a point
Neither do
where
I.
like my strength numbers were like way greater than they should be.
Yeah.
But like I've deadlifted well over 500 pounds. I've squatted well over 400 pounds. I've bench pressed well over 300 pounds, right? Like I've done all those things and that strength is there. So like when I grab onto somebody or when I put my frames into somebody, like, and I'm just like hanging out laughing, like the video that Eric shot of us the other day, like I have a big smile on my face, like while I'm rolling like through positions and through scrambles and stuff. Cause I'm just like,
It's fun.
I'm just like having a good time and I don't have to like think and have to try really hard to do that because I've done it all for so long and I can be relaxed with that. It's the same thing. Like you grab somebody like Nick or Darwin where they've done it for so long and they've trained and they've done all that stuff. And the way that they move is so effortless.
Yeah.
Like that's what I feel like people should be striving for. And unless you have the time to be on the mat all day, every day, like there has to be some sort of supplementation somewhere to get that. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Like I think most people would benefit in the jiu-jitsu world just by doing like some simple like stability stuff, like shoulder stability stuff, hip stability stuff, some core work where they actually learn how to use their core in the right way. And if like just by getting people to turn that stuff on, all of a sudden somebody puts their frames in and it feels really different.
Yeah.
All of a sudden somebody grabs a hold of you in a guard and they throw their legs up and it feels different because there's that like that heaviness in that stable side of them. Whereas like somebody that's like just like a weak person, like they could be really good at jiu-jitsu and they can have all the moves and all the skill set, but you just blow through everything because like and that's not saying like using your strength, but like you just like move through it because they don't have the ability to hold on to you. And I think that's one of the jiu-jitsu things that I've always like laughed at is people train and they like get so caught up in being good at the moves in jiu-jitsu that they forget about like actually being able to defend themselves.
And there's this other element to it, which is if you were like, it kind of always blows my mind when I see people that only do one thing all the time. I mean, even CrossFit to some degree, you see this because it can be culty in good and bad ways. But you will see someone like the very first question I would ask myself if I was getting into jiu-jitsu is how do I stay safe doing this? Like, what do I have to do outside to make sure? Because look at what you're doing. This is not a walk out of your office onto the mats activity. It's extreme hip flexion. It's forced thoracic rotation. It's taking any mobility in any joint that you own and then forcing it where it might not exist constantly, all day long, for every training session you ever do, for as many years as you do it. So how can you, and I don't mean to like, I want to phrase that even better. Like, what are you missing when you don't consider that mandates care outside of the mats? Like, you need to be doing some stuff with your body to make sure that it doesn't get jacked up. Why are people hurting their shoulders and their necks in basic jiu-jitsu class stuff? Because they go to plant their arm behind them and that has no stability. So it gets jacked up. They go to bridge or there's someone pushing them over and their head hits the ground and their neck has no stability. And their cervical spine is just all noodly. So yeah, everyone's getting hurt because they're not doing anything on the outside. So you take untrained people with nervousness and a like a unexpected nature of the sport. It's unpredictable and it's new. That's like a recipe for disaster. So almost to like pull this all together, and it, again, there might be people that are listening that aren't proximal to this place. This can kind of be the start to that. Is like your recovery protocol and taking care of yourself can be the beginnings of starting to care about your body in the sport that you're doing. And it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. It could be that you're in a run club and you guys run 6 days a week. Well, you know what? If you're running that kind of mileage, you got to care for your ankles and your knees and your hips. Or maybe not this year, but in a couple years, you're going to have a serious problem. And it might jack up your whole social life because your whole identity now is run club and you've done nothing to take care of your body. Now you can't go to run club anymore because your body's all jacked up. So like whatever sport you're doing, wherever you are in the world, understand that it doesn't take a huge investment, but it does take an investment into your strength and your recovery to keep doing it for nothing else, to just keep having more days on the mats, have more days in your striking class, your cardio boxing class, have more days in your run club, more days swimming, open water, or triathlon. Whatever the sport is, if you're not an 18-year-old trying to be the best in the world at it or on that trajectory, you got to start taking care of yourselves.
Yeah, and that 18-year-old that's trying to be the best in the world, like they've got to take care of themselves too, right? And it's super interesting. I just did an assessment with a pro skateboarder the other day.
Who?
Cole, I forget his last name. He's from Chicago.
Chris Cole?
Huh?
Chris Cole?
No.
Oh,
No. Younger.
Well, there's
kid.
a lot of local pro skateboarders.
Younger kid. He's from Chicago. He lives up in LA now, and he's kind of here back and forth part-time. His girlfriend's down here in training.
Another sport, having grown up a skateboarder who used to like compete skateboarding and do tons of street shit. Also wish I knew about recovery and strength training when I was skateboarding.
It's like, okay, how do we do the most we can with as little as possible and not like kill you financially? So we went through our assessment, had one of our guys do all of his measurements and stuff, and I was like, okay, like these are the stretches that you need to do. These are the basic movements that you need to do. You can do it on your own. This will change the way that you can skateboard because it'll start to put you in better positions. Your body won't hurt every day, like all those little things. And it's like from a young age to as old as you can be, if